Want to wait a minute or two?
Yeah, it looks like we have 7 people on right now, and if we want to give it like 2 more minutes, we can be on agent time and ensure they come in.
Sounds good. I'm gonna pretty up my hair just for a minute because it's a
Okay. There we go.
Holly, I've got to figure out the lighting in here. My wife used my office the other day, and her colleagues were teasing her, said it looked like it was a ransom video with the lighting.
I like it.
Yeah. Parker says, yeah, here's our mortgage partner. We keep him in Parker's basement.
Right. He'll get you your pre-approval super fast.
All right. Thanks everybody for showing up here today, and we will get started. Oops. Let me share the other screen here. That's not what it was supposed to do. Are you seeing the whole screen, or are you seeing just one part of it?
2 different things.
Yeah, we're seeing both sides.
What the heck? Let's do this. Pull the plug.
Technical difficulties.
It happens. It happens. There we go. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the pre-approval process today. This is going to be just a brief overview of what us as Flex Mortgage, and then also as a general rule of thumb, what any mortgage professional who's working a buyer of yours should be looking at and is often looking at as part of the process. Okay. So this will be relatively brief. I'll try and keep it light, but any questions along the way, as always, in these Wednesday sessions, please jump in. More than happy to answer questions because we will cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. Number one, I just wanted to talk from a higher level perspective. I think that our goal is always to develop a comfort level with the buyer. In almost a decade of doing this, I will try and get the buyer on the phone, or if they want to meet in person or whatever it might be, over Zoom with a financing consultation. How can you establish a relationship with the consumer? I actually included a text message in here from Maddie Jackson this week, was saying, hey, how do we best connect Flex with our buyers? Maddie's been in a good rhythm for a while regarding this, and you'll see this is a good example of how it's often done 3-way text. It's good chatting with you. This is our preferred lender. He's going to get in touch with you, start your pre-approval process. And, I always will respond and say, hey, look, I'm happy to walk through options. I'm going to include an application because some people just want to jump in and do the application. Other people want to have a conversation. Okay. And then let me know a time to connect. So that's often how this process starts between you, the agent, the buyer, and us on the mortgage side. Okay. When we have a conversation with that buyer, the number one thing that I always ask is, what are you looking to do and how can I help you? And that's an open-ended question that allows the buyer to talk and establishes the why. Okay. Good example, client yesterday said, I want to move to Northfield. I just don't like my neighbors. Okay. Well, we've established a why, right? Another woman mentioned, hey, my husband died 9 months ago and he had terminal cancer and he died in hospice at home. And I walk through the living room every single day and see where his bed was, right? Well, that's a pretty powerful why, right? But it also establishes a comfort level with the client in terms of, okay, this is somebody that I know, like, and trust, and it isn't just numbers. It's not just a pre-approval printing at this stage. We also cover, in my opinion, what's the maybe second most important question from a financing perspective, which is how long are you going to stay in the home? Okay, because this allows us to start strategizing about, do you want to buy the rate down with points, or are you not going to live there long enough for those points to make a difference, right? Are you going to sell your current home and put a huge amount of those net proceeds toward a new purchase, but maybe you're non-contingent, so you're going to do that not at the same time, right? Conversations along those lines, right? Those sorts of things are what we try and do to differentiate ourselves from other lenders, right? There will be so many, okay, here's my loan application, and then here's your pre-approval, go. All right, well, there's been no discussion about what the buyer's financial plan is, right? I mean, why they're doing this, right? Number one, and then also, what are the important things that should be covered in terms of a financial strategy, right? Maybe they want to rent another home out. Again, all of these things that are just not, as good as our technology is, that real human element through a 10-minute conversation is really, really valuable. And in my opinion, it's the most important time that I spend with clients day in, day out. Okay. And then from there, we are going to cover the big areas. Okay. When you talk about what are the big areas, well, there are 4 real elements of a mortgage loan approval. Okay. You've got credit, you've got income, assets, and property. CIAP. Okay. I don't have a real good acronym for that. But those are the big 4, and we'll cover each of those one at a time. When you talk about credit, a borrower is going to get 3 different credit scores from the 3 major credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So for example, you've got a 760 from Experian, you've got a 740 from Equifax, and you've got a 720 from TransUnion. A lender is going to use the middle of those scores. Okay, so use that same example: 760, 740, 720. The middle score of 740 is what is going to be used. All right. Now, there will always be an instance, as we covered in last week's meeting, where the lower of the 2 borrowers' middle scores will be used. So I think I used the same example last week. Let's say you've got a wife that is 760, 740, and 720. So they're at 740. And then you've got a husband that's 700, 680, and 660. Well, 680 is going to be the overall score that is used because it's the lower of the 2 middle scores. Okay. That also becomes valuable going back to this idea. Any idea where your credit score is? Well, I've got a really good score, but my husband struggles with his credit. Okay. Well, now we can establish some strategies. Maybe just the wife wants to be on the loan by herself. Okay. Maybe one of them owns property, but another doesn't. All of these conversations about laying the groundwork for a strategy to get your buyer the best deal. A credit score is also going to take into account all of these factors. So if you see, there are 5 parts of a credit score, and Holly, this might be something that we could do at another time in terms of what goes into your credit score. But you will see that there are 5 different elements, right? The payment history is the most important. So, whenever someone is struggling with credit, I say, look, even if it's just a minimum payment, get that sucker on auto pay, because late payments on credit cards hurt the most, right? They make up more than 1/3 of your credit score, according to this wheel. All right. Amounts owed. This is a big one, right? You have a credit card that is maxed out $5,000 and you're right at the credit limit. Well, that's going to affect your overall usage of credit. That's 30%. It's the second biggest part of the score. I always tell people, if you can pay those cards down below 30% of the credit limit, so let's say it's a $5,000 credit limit credit card, you can get that thing below $1,500. That's going to do some wonders for your score, because it's the second biggest factor in what's making up your credit score. Okay. Length of credit history. All right. If you're brand new, you have an established credit, maybe you're just getting a couple of credit cards, a car loan, something like that. That's going to be not as good a score as someone who has a long established credit history. All right. And then the 10%, new credit, that's going to be inquiries. All right. We talked about, I think maybe it was in this meeting, but so often people are saying, I don't want another lender to check my credit again because it's going to hurt my credit. Actually, shout out Jen Edmondson. She was the one that we talked about regarding this. You can pull your credit anytime in a 30-day window. It will not affect your score. So let's say you had somebody that was pre-approved with Rocket. That's where I'm getting this from the meeting last week, right? You've got 30 days in which you can pull a new credit score, but multiple inquiries over an extended period of time, that's going to ding your credit score. All right. But that's only 10% of this model, right? And then credit mix. You have credit cards, you have student loans, you have installment loans, which would be like a car loan or lease. You have a mortgage, you have a second mortgage. All of these different kinds of credit can be valuable from this perspective. All right. So a lender is going to pull this. Obviously, the 3 scores are going to be spit out at them, and then they're going to look at the credit trade lines. They're going to look at potential derogatory credit events. Those would be bankruptcies, foreclosures, and short sales. They're also going to look at collection accounts, if there are active collection accounts, and what, if anything, needs to be done with those. Any questions on credit as part of the loan approval process?
During a refi, can the spouse that wasn't on the original get added on then?
During a refi, can the spouse that was yes, yeah, that is not an issue. That is
So
not an issue.
if the spouse with the lower credit doesn't want to be on there to hurt the loan from origination, can they be added later?
Added to the loan or added to title?
Probably the title. You probably don't want them on the loan. It could jump the interest, right?
Correct. Right. That brings up a great question in terms of how people take title. Okay. Now, remember, Minnesota is a marital interest state, right? So if my wife goes and buys a property and I'm not on the purchase agreement, or I'm not on the loan, or I'm not in title, I still own half the property. Okay. Because Minnesota is a marital interest state. That's why you hear this 1 to buy, 2 to sell. Okay. It's also 1 to buy, 2 to refi. All right. So let's say that you're in that example, Josh, you're doing a refinance in which you own property jointly with your spouse. Whether they're on title or not, they need to sign, because they're saying, well, hang on, what are you doing with the property that's half of mine, right? To use your example from a purchase perspective, people do this all the time. Gosh, I've got a 660 credit score, but my wife has perfect credit. Well, if your wife qualifies on her own, just do the loan in her name, better interest rates, better PMI, all this sort of stuff. And then you can still be on the purchase agreement. So you still have, official title to the property beyond just marital interest. Gotcha. But yeah, those sort of strategies should always be talked through versus here's your pre-approval letter. And it's like, well, why do I have an FHA loan? Oh, because your spouse has the lower of the 2 scores. Well, she only makes $2,500 a month. We qualify on my income, right? Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we just use my income with an 800 credit score? Oh gosh, that's a good idea, right? Any good loan officer should be going through those different strategies to try and find your buyer the best deal. Long answer to your question. Make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. All right, let's talk about income. So employment history of 2 years with no sizable gaps of employment. That's where every income analysis stops and starts. Okay. Fun fact, you have somebody that graduated high school transcripts suffice for a 2-year work history. Somebody just graduated college, got their very first job. Well, wait a second, I gotta have a 2-year history before, of working before I can buy a property. No, you don't. Any kind of school transcripts will suffice for a 2-year work history immediately. Okay. When you talk about gaps of employment, it's a little bit of a gray area. Okay. Depends on the type of loan that you're talking about. FHA is a good example. FHA, if you've got a 6-month income gap, then they're going to say, all right, well, we want to see you were working for the 2 years prior to that gap. All right. So FHA is a little bit more tight on what they're going to require regarding gaps of employment. Look, somebody quits their job, takes 2 weeks off or a month off, not a problem. Typically, when you get to that 6-month gap is where you have some issues. Okay. Base, overtime, commission, and bonuses. The base you can use immediately. People often ask me, okay, I just got a $5 an hour raise for a 40-hour-a-week full-time job. Are you going to average my income over the past couple of years, or how does that work? No. You got verification from the employer, you just got a raise, then you're going to be qualified at the new pay rate. Okay. So your raise goes into effect immediately. Your buying power is reflective of that raise. It's not watered down. You talk about overtime, commissions, and bonuses. Often, and I say often with an asterisk, a 2-year history of receiving this kind of income is necessary. All right. So I got a bonus in 2021 and I just got a bonus in 2022. All right. Well, that would be sufficient. We've got 2 years of receipt, but commissions and overtime fall into a little bit of a different category, right? Well, I didn't make overtime in 2021, but I just started and I'm making a huge amount of overtime. Doesn't matter. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and HUD, so conventional and government loans, are going to want to see that long history of getting paid overtime and commissions. When we take into account that income, then it's a matter of calculating a borrower's debt to income ratio, right? You've heard about DTI. What's the DTI? Is it, they have too high of a DTI? They got a good DTI. Debt to income ratio. All right. I'm going to use $6,000 a month as a metric. There are 2 parts to the debt to income ratio calculation. There is the housing ratio, which is the new mortgage PITIA. PITIA meaning principal and interest on the loan, taxes, insurance, and A is for HOA dues, if applicable, with a condo, townhome, or PUD. All right. So let's say that you've got a new mortgage that, with everything factored in, is $2,000 a month, and you make a gross income. I should mention that all qualifying income is pre-tax. So it's, you make $96,000 a year. We don't worry about the take-home pay. We only care about what the gross pre-tax income is. All right. So $2,000 a month in terms of what the new mortgage payment is, and $6,000 is what the borrower makes for gross income. That new housing ratio would be 33%. The mortgage is 1/3 of their total gross income. 2,000 divided by 6,000. Everybody follows my math there. So that would be fine. That is in that category. So that's the housing ratio. It just has to do with the mortgage divided by the total income. But the total ratio will include all other debt. All right, this means car loans, student loans, and credit cards, and existing mortgages that will not be paid off in the case of non-contingent offers, for example. All right. Credit cards, always the minimum payment is used. Always, always, always the minimum payment. Car loans, pretty cut and dried. What's your lease? It's $329 a month. Okay. All right. And then student loans, and this is a popular topic of conversation because of deferment laws that we see moratoriums by this administration on student loans. Doesn't matter if it's in deferment, if you're making payments on them, if you're not making payments on them, it's 1/2 of 1% of the total balance. Okay. I've got $30,000 in student loan debt, but I'm not making payments. All right. It would be 1/2 of 1% of that balance. So to do the math for you, 1/2 of 1% on 30 grand, $150 a month. That's what's included from the lender's perspective. So let's pretend, to use our same example, we've got a new mortgage of $2,000 and we've got all other debt that cumulatively is $1,000 a month. All right. Our total ratio would be 50%. $2,000 mortgage plus $1,000 in all other expenses. That's $3,000, $6,000 a month, exactly half. Okay, so that total ratio would be 50%. So what ratios are allowed? Well, generally, conventional will go to about 45% for the total ratio. FHA and VA will go to about 55%. All right, and then jumbo loans and USDA loans are going to be significantly lower than that. But you come back to the same example, okay? So let's say the borrower really wants to go conventional, but they've got a 50% debt to income ratio and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac are saying, no, they have too much debt, all right? Well, that's where you could pivot and pay off some of that debt at closing. And then, okay, I'm gonna pay off my Target card, which is $200 a month. All right, well, now you've reduced that back end ratio by paying that debt off. And oftentimes good loan officers will employ these tactics when they have really tight borrowers and say, hey, you know what? I know you were looking to go 10% down, but what would actually make this best is if you went 5% down, for example, and then used that remaining 5% to pay off this, and this. All right. It does two things. Number one, it makes the loan approvable. And number two, the consumer should be thinking this way, right? The consumer should say, okay, well, gosh, 5%, if I allocate 5% toward my credit card, which is 24.99%, I'm going to attack that high interest debt. That's a smarter play than putting an extra 5% down on a 30-year mortgage at, let's say, 5%. Okay, so that was a lot. I know that's a lot of math. I tried to keep it as simple as possible, but questions on income and debt to income ratio. Please don't be afraid. I'm really wired now, got coffee, so.
I'll go, Colin. Typically when buyers start asking me, what's this going to look like? How's that? I just tell them I am not the numbers person and I need you to talk to the lender, because I never really want to speak out of turn or give them a wrong quote or any of that. But I also want to make sure like I'm not skimping something that is my job and responsibility, but I'm just not comfortable spewing out numbers to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a really great point. When you're trying to figure out what the payment would be, the last thing that you need to do as an agent is to pull up a calculator and, oh, let me plug in your appropriate taxes. Well, the listing agent put the taxes in from 2021 because they're lazy and taxes have gone up $300. And now all of a sudden, you are, sort of in this qualifying mix. So I agree. I think that the default can always be, you're going to want to check with your lender on that,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure like
Yeah,
that I wasn't
yeah.
doing that and everybody wasn't rolling their eyes, that I was, should be doing something, but it just, yeah, I feel
Yeah,
better.
and for sure. And this is all just background. So I mean, this is I'm not trying to turn you all into loan officers. This is all just background. Anybody else on income?
Colin, I have a question on employment history. I had a buyer that was going to be transferring from out of state. If he were to get new employment once he arrives, how is that going to work for him to get a house?
What kind of job do you know?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. It was just a situation I had recently where he thought he was going to be able to work remotely. He was from Oregon. And then he found out from his boss that he can't because of some tax issue. And so he said, well, maybe I'll just come to Minnesota and get a job. So I was just kind of wondering, what kind of advice I could give him.
Yeah, that is not an issue if it's in the same line of work. Okay. So when you have people that are, using a similar skill set to get another hourly or salary job in a similar line of work, that's fine.
Yeah,
That's
that's
fine.
what he would do, definitely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When you have people that are going from being a short order cook to a mechanic, a little bit problematic, for example, when you've got differing industries. But yeah, I think that you would have no problem with that. And sometimes those loans will close prior to the borrower starting employment with an offer letter, and that all background check, drug test, if applicable, that all conditions of employment have been completed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And obviously, Chris, that is a lot easier with full-time jobs. I
Right.
mean, if you got somebody said, yeah, I'm going to work 30 hours a week at this, particular store. Now you're in a variable income category. It can be pretty challenging. But yeah, I do not think that that would be too much of a problem.
Okay, great.
Colin, question for you. What about when it comes to servers and tip wise?
Tough deal. Yeah. So when you have tips, they're going to fall in the same category as, and when I said tough deal, I just meant coming out of the pandemic, it's been tough. It's been tough qualifying borrowers because the guidelines are so stringent and they're not making excuses for COVID and restaurants.
Like I know some servers that are making $10 an hour, but they're raking in 75, 80,000 a year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. So, in that category, you can often tie together, the longer they've worked at a restaurant, the better. Okay. So generally 1 year at a restaurant is the linchpin. Okay. Beyond 1 year, you want to have a 2-year history of receiving tip income. That doesn't mean that, you can't have worked for 12 months at Bar La Grassa and then another 12 months at Cove. Okay. As long as you've got that 24-month history of receiving the tip income, it can be sufficient to have, okay, well, let's average that over 2 years, because we have the receipt. Where you get into trouble is, well, I just got a great job and I just started at Birch. Okay, well, that's fantastic, but you just started, right? So when you're in that first 12-month period, it becomes a lot more challenging to use that tip income, even if you've been a server for 10 years.
Gotcha. Yep.
And we didn't cover self-employment income, but self-employment income would fall into a different category. There'd be a tax return analysis, personal returns, business returns, things of that nature, which we can, I didn't want to get too deep in the weeds on that.
So Colin, would that go for the same as like somebody who does freelance work then? Would they kind of classify under the self-employed or whatever category?
Freelance work. Yeah. So it depends on how you're paid. If it's a 1099 job, often, I mean, which I believe you all are, right? So, I mean, this is pertinent to you. A 1099 job is going to be often declared on a Schedule C when you're the sole proprietor. Okay. Now, I know some people use S Corp elections and things like that. But Alex, the question is, if the borrower is being paid 1099, then that's self-employment income that you would want to see a 2-year work history of. Okay. Self-employment, it can be a little bit interrupted, right? I mean, because you're not clocking in 40 hours a week. No different than you might sell 4 houses in June and 10 houses in October and nothing in between. Okay. But the 2-year self-employment history is simply that the business has been in effect for 24 months. And then the 1099 application is going to be, you apply those gross receipts of that 1099 income, and then all of your write-offs, and then whatever's on that bottom line, which is box 31 of the Schedule C, for example, that is your net income from the business. Are you following me there? I can pull it up if that's easier.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Yep. And you know what, Holly, that's maybe a good idea to, a self-employment, and how we could involve Chrissy in that if we wanted to, but self-employment calculation and then how that works for S Corp and Schedule C.
I just wrote it down.
Yep. Sorry. All right, where are we here? So credit, income, assets. Assets can fall into a lot of different categories. In fact, I pulled all of the auto-populating most popular assets that are used for qualifying here on the right. Checking, savings, money market, CDs, mutual funds, stocks, options, bonds, retirement, bridge loan, individual development account. I don't even know what that is. Trust account. Maybe that's what they mean by IRA. Anyway, life insurance, grant, gift cash, gift of equity, proceeds from property sale, proceeds from non-property sale, secured borrowed funds, and then unsecured borrowed funds. All right. So that's a mouthful. Okay. Usually you're going to fall into the category of checking, savings, stocks, IRAs, 401ks, 401k loans, sale from property, net proceeds, and gifts. Okay. The key thing is that, we will often get PDFs because those are what is acceptable. A lot of people like screenshots. PDFs are important. Let's talk about gift funds. That's what I wanted to underscore in this scenario, and then also talk about how in this non-contingent environment that is sort of cooling down a little bit, some different strategy that we've used to get borrowers approved non-contingent. So gift funds can be received from a relative. That can be typically a blood relative. Sometimes a close friend will work. Sometimes you'll have boyfriend, girlfriend that I remember when I bought my first house, I was getting gift funds, and the loan officer, who's a long friend of mine, said, Colin, I need you to write this gift letter, and I need you to call Nicole, my now wife, but girlfriend at the time, your fiance. Ooh, all right. So typically blood relatives, fiancés, or very close friends, gift funds are acceptable as part of the transaction. The easiest way that can be done, Jackie asked me about this over the weekend, is that the borrower will fill out a gift letter that just says it's a gift and not a loan. And then they will have the donor, let's say it's their mom and dad, fill out a cashier's check made out to the buyer and the title company, and they bring that cashier's check to the closing. That's the easiest way to do it on conventional loans. And then we don't have to see mom and dad's statements. Okay. So this is often a strategy that's employed where, hey, we're going to sell our house. I promise. We're going to get $200,000. We want to put those $200,000 toward the purchase of a new house, but we're obviously not going to have access to it because we haven't sold it yet. Gift funds can come into play. Can mom and dad maybe float you some money? Can a relative float you some money for a certain amount of time until that property sells? Bridge loans, home equity lines of credit, another good source of it, although that's certainly more expensive than bank of mom and dad. And then 401k loans. 401k loans, not distributions that are taxable, but often you will see individuals that are saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to borrow from my 401k, and then I will pay off that 401k loan once my house sells. It's usually about $50 to execute that. It's a lot cheaper than a HELOC or bridge loan. So those are sort of the asset classes and strategies that we've advised in this non-contingent environment. Questions about assets? All right. So we've got credit, income, assets, and then we have property. Okay, this is the fourth of the big four. An appraisal or no appraisal in the case of appraisal waivers that we covered in this meeting last week. Obviously, the appraiser is going to look at valuation on comps, the condition of the property. It's where you'll see work orders for government loans, which would be FHA, VA. And then also you'll see health and safety issues that are conditioned out for conventional loans. Things like broken windows. Even Tanner had a house where there weren't smoke detectors that were meeting code. It was a conventional loan, appraiser conditioned for that. So you will see health and safety issues that are conditioned sometimes. And then other property considerations, we talked about in our first meeting on these Wednesdays, condo questionnaire. If you have a condo, then condos will go through a separate property underwriting process. So that is typically how it works. So you've got credit, income, assets, and property. Any questions on the big four? Okay, and then just wanted to take you through real briefly what the let me see here, what this would look like from a borrower's end, because I think the more that you know about, come on, really? So what does the application look like? I'm trying to get this person sitting on the couch. I mean, that feels very COVID to me. I don't, and I don't like, I'm trying to get that fixed. Although a picture of me probably wouldn't be any better. So when you have a borrower that's going to go to, and of course it's going to ask me to do all this stuff. It's going to verify your account. Oh, it's probably not going to let me do this just because of, Matt, I probably just locked us all out.
How many times did you just try that?
So it's going to take you through what's my loan purchase. Oh my gosh, look at that. That's so cool. Just getting started, making offers, found a house, under contract. All right, where are you looking to purchase? Apple Valley, obviously. Back to the roots. Primary residence, investment, second home. What's a comfortable monthly housing payment? Okay. Are you working with a real estate agent? If they collect no, then that's an opportunity, obviously, to connect them with somebody on the permanent homes team. What's the approximate price of the property? How much is your down payment? And you will see that this will take you through your name, contact information, where you live. For example, this is all pretty easy. It will use this Google technology to fill in automatically how long you live there. Do you own? Do you rent? Do you live rent-free? What's your residency type? Do you have any dependents? And then it'll allow you to go through the co-borrower screen as well. So if you want to apply with a spouse, a partner, whatever it might be, you fill in their information as well, that they're applying with the spouse. And then this will also go through income with this 2 years, assets, any real estate that you own currently, declarations in terms of judgments, foreclosures, bankruptcies, short sales, things like that, demographic information, a consent for credit with a secure application of the Social Security number and a confirmation of the Social Security number. And then when this is all done, our system will actually use logical if-then technology. So let's say that I put in that I was self-employed. Okay, well, it will automatically ask me for the last 2 years of my tax returns. All right, maybe I said that I am getting spousal maintenance, alimony, or child support. It's going to automatically ask me for a copy of the divorce decree. You know, circumstances like that. I'm a permanent resident alien. It's going to automatically ask you for the green card. So the idea here is that it streamlines the process so you don't have borrowers that are drowning in paperwork. Okay, so just wanted to do a real quick breeze through on what the front end and back end application process looks like here at Flex. Guys, that was a lot of ground. Any questions here before we wrap this thing up? I know I try and keep these short.
No,
All right.
I'll answer. No. Awkward silence.
Just let it marinate. Let it marinate. You never know. Might be a burning desire that's out there. All right. Jackson, you got anything? You good?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being in these meetings. Hope you learned something. And as always, anytime you have questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Matt, or John.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.